Let's start with the state regulatory environment. Now, as I described, I don't think any of us, and all of us have been practicing for a long time and seen a lot of tax changes, I don't think any of us were prepared or could imagine the result of South Dakota versus Wayfair. And the flood of state laws that have come out of this is incredible. I'm reminded of the movie Airplane. If you remember, when the plane is landing, the families are waiting at one gate, and then flight 178, now at gate 17, now at gate 18, now at gate 19, and it keeps moving down. And that's exactly how these regulations have come down the line, these new state laws. I mean, legislatures are pouncing on this. Most state legislatures that have already enacted a sales tax have enacted post-Wayfair legislation. And I think there's only two, like Missouri, and there's another state that haven't. Am I right?
Technically three, but we'll get into that. There's
okay.
Missouri, Florida, and Kansas.
Have not yet. I know there are bills pending in Missouri. I'm not sure about the other two states.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean that they're not still trying to collect sales tax.
Right, right. A lot of them have tried to piggyback on that. And so one of the things that we've seen, of course, is this tremendous onslaught of state law regulation that have come out of it, that a lot of states are mirroring the law that was upheld in the Supreme Court decision of South Dakota versus Wayfair. And I'll give you a little bit of the Reader's Digest condensed version, and Robert's going to talk a little bit more than I am. But basically, the Supreme Court decision, South Dakota versus Wayfair, overturned years and years of constitutional authority that either through the due process or the Commerce Clause, a state could not impose a sales tax obligation on an out-of-state seller unless they had some kind of physical presence in that state. And the South Dakota law in question had economic nexus. So if you had $100,000 of sales or 200 or more transactions, then South Dakota imposed a requirement to collect the sales tax on retail sales coming into the state. And of course, we all know through the web and what have you, most sales or many sales go through the web. And so that had a tremendous impact on the e-commerce business and on the sellers. So when the Supreme Court did that, many legislatures said, well, what the heck, we'll adopt those same kind of law that just passed muster in South Dakota, and they enacted very similar legislation. Some state, I think it was Maryland, am I correct? That the Maryland Department of Revenue, when it first came out, they weren't going to wait for the legislature to pass legislation. They said, well, we're going to go ahead and impose a tax ourselves on out-of-state sellers. It was Maryland, wasn't it?
Well, Rhode Island, I believe, was the very first one, and they put the statute into place back in 2017.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's the one you're referring to.
I'm thinking administratively, Maryland decided, the Maryland Department of Revenue, whatever they call themselves, decided, hey, this is what we're going to do. So it was a little unnerving that they decided to take it upon themselves. But I think since then, Maryland's probably passed legislation anyway.
But then again, California and Florida didn't have any legislation originally, and they were going after it based on the fact that Amazon had warehouses and various sellers had product in warehouses in California, in Florida, and those states were going after it based on pure physical nexus. So you didn't even know your product was in an Amazon warehouse in California or Florida, and those two states have now taken the position that they can go back to 2015 or earlier if you've had product there. So they don't care that they don't have legislation, although California, of course, now has legislation.
And Shelley, are they asking them to prove that? Prove that they didn't have inventory there?
Not really. They subpoenaed all the information out of Amazon. So it's not really a matter of proof because Amazon had to comply with the subpoena. So they know. It's really, and California's being very aggressive about it. And we're going to talk a little bit about California, so we'll come back to that one.